I still look behind me. I still hold keys in my hand.
Do you wear headphones or like I take an earbud out all the time.
Yes, yes. Well, I always I just make sure that my back is like close to a wall. I make sure that if I sense someone behind me, if there's a man behind me, I always try to make sure that they're ahead of me instead of behind me. And yeah, but that's just my body. Even though I know that I have a right to be able to walk around in this world and be safe.
The library was my space, and there was just so much.
To the Harbor Grace excursion with the boys to have a time.
So I'm going to jump right in. And the first question is, I think, just like a scene setting one, which is what inspired you to write this book? And especially, why did you write it now?
Well, yeah, thank you for asking that. And thank you so much for coming, even though it's like one of the probably.
I know.
You know what I mean? I feel really honored when people come to any of the events here. I wrote it because I moved to Scarborough in 1987, and that was the same year that a serial killer, who we don't have to ever mention his name, he doesn't deserve it, a serial killer started attacking young women and girls. And so I was going through puberty the same time as someone was doing those attacks, and I understood that I was one of the targets.
Right.
And so to go through to grow into a woman's body and know that being a woman means being targeted really shaped me. And I know that it shaped a lot of people during that time. And it's shaped how we've parented, it's shaped how we've related to other people, how we've made love, how we've not made love, like all of these things, right? So I thought I've seen enough true crime focusing on perpetrators. And so I wanted to really subvert this genre so that we are looking at a film editor who is dealing with true crime and really assessing for herself how did we as a society allow this to happen? How do we let history to repeat itself again and again? And what is her role in it in parenting her son? Okay, so that's a big thing.
Introduced so many things that we're going to come back to. But I also think there's something very timely about this book at this moment where, as we see rollbacks around protections for bodily autonomy and things like that, like it feels like there's themes that are sadly very resonant right now.
Yes.
So that's unfortunate.
Yes, absolutely. You know, and then there's something about writing this that makes you, as a writer, I want people to feel the same way, which is my body is my body. I have choice. And it also means that I have a choice in this world as to how I tell other people about their bodies and really empower them.
Yeah.
Right? It gives me hope instead of what I often feel after watching true crime, which is that this is just going to keep on happening.
Yeah.
And
it's inescapable.
Yeah, it's inescapable. Wasn't that ever entertaining? But really, I guess it was unstoppable. Can't really do anything about it. Right? You know what I mean?
Yes, 100%.
So so that's what was driving me towards creating this book.
Okay. So you touched on something that you also explicitly state at the beginning of the book. So before you actually get into the story, there's a page that says, "This is a work of fiction loosely based on true events. It's not about him, it's about us."
Yes.
And I loved that because it is such a reframe in the way that we talk about crime and these kind of quote-unquote salacious crime stories. Tell me a bit about that sentiment. How did you come to that feeling? What made you frame the book in that way?
Well, because I have this love-hate relationship with true crime.
Yes.
That I think most of us here know that feeling where you catch yourself wanting to, you're watching like this non-fiction story unfold that's usually horrible and uncomfortable. And it's the same thing over and over again. You have a story of a killer and their background story. Why did they become violent? And then these shoddy investigations. and these society telling victims and survivors like you should do better at protecting yourself.
Yes.
And then when the killer is caught, then patriarchy says you're welcome, right?
Yeah,
and,
basically.
right. And so I really wanted to change this narrative, that I wanted to just focus on what is it like to fear, to live in fear that your body is going to be attacked. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to process something that I feel has been unprocessed for decades for many people, not just of that generation. Like I was in Vancouver recently, and the hush that fell over the crowd when I said, I understand that you know what it's like to have a serial killer in your midst.
Absolutely.
And that hush that went over the crowd. It's just that people know what it's like when they're wondering, is it my neighbor? Is, who's going to be next? And being queer, like in Toronto, we've had our share of serial killers in the queer community in Toronto. So I just, I really wanted to just focus on like, what is it like to survive or not survive?
Right.
Right. And when we pull that focus from perpetrators, I believe it empowers us to stop the cycle.
I can see that. Because the other thing with true crime is the idea of perfect victimhood, right? Like the idea that there's something you can do to protect yourself is very compelling, even if it doesn't fit with your feminist values or your political values or whatever, because it's so scary.
Yes.
And so if you can just do the right thing, if you can follow whatever rules, and then that frame, like then you end up perpetuating the same ideas.
Yes, and self-awareness is so important, because that's why I really wanted Alma, who's the protagonist, to be this imperfect feminist.
Yeah.
Like believing that, she's progressive, that she's going to be, that parent that really empowers her child to really love his partner. But in actual fact, she hasn't taught him how to take a no.
Yeah.
Right? How to accept rejection, that it happens. Too bad, so sad. Right?
That's it.
And I really wanted to show like her journey, her very slow and painful journey to realize that, first off, like any harm that has been done to her is not her fault.
Yeah.
And that and also what are her knee-jerk reactions when harm does occur, right? Because I would like to think that I'm a progressive person, but the truth is that the body doesn't lie. The body doesn't lie. Like when I go out at night, I still cover myself up. I still look behind me. I still hold keys in my hand.
Do you wear headphones, or like I take an earbud out all the time?
Yes. Well, I always I just make sure that my back is like close to a wall. I make sure that if I sense someone behind me, if there's a man behind me, I always try to make sure that they're ahead of me instead of behind me. And but that's just my body, even though I know that I have a right to be able to walk around in this world and be safe.
Exactly.
Right? And I catch myself also policing young feminine people too about their bodies and covering their bodies up. And I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot from this newer generation where, they dress in a particular way. I love it. I love being able to see such confidence in different body types.
Yeah.
And also showing different body parts that I wouldn't have dreamed showing.
Would be like acceptable.
Yeah, it wouldn't be acceptable, but I'm so happy. I'm so happy to see a young person just be like, I'm not wearing a bra.
Yeah.
I'm not covering up my nipples.
It's so...
And I'm not sucking in my gut.
That relearning, though, is
it.
fascinating, because I feel like I've had to retrain my eyes to be like, why do you think that's a problem?
Yes.
Like, why? What about this is bothering you?
Yes.
And it really takes a moment then to be like, oh dear.
Yeah.
Like this time where I thought I was like, I had learned all the things I had to learn, and instead there's still so much more to learn.
Yes. And I think that's the crux of the book is that there's still so much to learn.
Yes.
We can do better.
And you can learn.
And we can learn. And that's why that this painful journey that Alma goes through by facing her own pain is that it is like it has to start at home. And I remember being a facilitator for different panels of conversation around rape culture.
Yeah.
You'd have this entire hour-long thing where sex educators are on stage. We'll talk about, about the insidiousness of rape culture, the importance of hearing a no, and blah, blah, blah. And at the end, the host of the entire conversation ended up saying, well, thank you so much. I better lock up my daughter. After all that. So an entire hour has been wasted.
I'm so glad that we learned.
Yeah, I'm so glad so then you can see, right, like how insidious it is, like how rape culture is. It always seems to go back to that, to women protecting themselves.
Well, and I found, in some ways, the tiny moments of broken consent in this book much more difficult than the big moments. So, like, Alma's neighbor and the way that her mom, like, glosses over entirely or refuses to acknowledge that the neighbor is making Alma uncomfortable.
Yes.
I had a physical cringe.
Yes.
And that, to me, was so much more... It wasn't more distressing than the idea of what was happening to other people in the book in other ways, but it stayed with me in a way that I didn't fully anticipate.
Yes. I think that I'm glad that you're saying that, just because I really wanted to show how we're groomed, because it's tiny things, right?
Very tiny.
I mean, obviously there are some people who have been groomed by much more devastating actions.
Yes.
However, most of us are groomed in these tiny little actions around what you wear, and not believing people, like, oh, he didn't mean that.
He didn't mean it that way.
He didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Or I don't want to visit this person. Yes, you do.
I don't want to give that person a hug. I don't want to shake hands. I don't want to do those things.
Yes.
Because it's an innocent act.
Yes.
But the intention is so obviously not innocent.
Yes, absolutely. And definitely, I'm a person who, I am a survivor. And I definitely, for the longest time, I did not even call it rape, because of the fact that it took me like about 6 months to go, wait a minute, I think that was rape.
Right.
Right? It took such a long time because of the fact that I've been groomed all my life to believe that certain things should be welcome.
That's it.
Yes.
And it requires you to, like, trust yourself. And I imagine there might have also been, like, we have these conversations about who gets raped and what kind of person gets raped.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to think about these messages that you're receiving about yourself. Like, all of that requires so much thinking through.
Yes.
And it requires, like, the bravery to face that and to say, like, no, what I experienced is what I experienced.
Yes.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
So, okay, I want to think a little bit more also about the who does the grooming, because I think even, especially in, like, the today's vernacular, the way we talk about grooming is the predator and the person who is being victimized. Yes. But the thing about that example that we talked about, like, that was also Alma's mother who was contributing to that. And that no one is unscathed in this book. Yes. There's a lot of blame to go around. And so I would love to hear a little bit about that part of the storytelling.
Because I really wanted to show that everyone plays a part with why a perpetrator is able to do what they've done. And I can say for myself that there are times where you see harm being done to someone and it takes you a little bit of time to really clock it. Mm-hmm. And then if you are brave enough to then say something about it. I have been in a position where it took me probably about 48 hours for me to really think about what my strategy was.
Wait a second. Yeah.
About how I'm going to approach this person who I believe was doing harm to a child.
Yeah.
And that takes a long time. Like, it takes a long time to just think about, like, well, how am I going to say this? Why do I care about whether or not I'm hurting this person's feelings?
But but why did you care? Because I feel like that's part of it too.
That's part of it too. Yeah, because it's like you care because you've been taught to be nice. And thankfully, I'm not, like, as an Asian woman, I'm not the nicest person.
But that's,
you know what I'm saying? Like, I say that because people expect Asian women to be nice.
Be nice.
Yeah. So, and sometimes people find me really off-putting. I'm, like, too freaking bad, right? If you find me, like, saying with it, oh well. But even me being as assertive as I am, it took, like, a lot of, like, journaling, looking in the mirror, going, okay, practicing what the sentence is going to be, and saying, I know what you're doing. I think it's inappropriate. Stop. Right? So, I even saying that now, it gives me chills. Like, oh my gosh, like it hurts.
You
It's very
saying it,
difficult.
I was like, I feel a little uncomfortable
Yeah.
at the idea of being that direct.
Yes. Yeah. So just consider that is that when it comes to perpetrators, all kinds, not just serial killers, but all kinds.
Yes.
Is that along the way there are people going, huh, that's weird. That's a weird thing to do. What is that about? I don't think was that a hit or was that a hug or and and your body plays tricks on you thinking what is appropriate, what's not appropriate. Should I say something? Is it my place? And it does take a really brave person to speak up. So you see this, like, for example, in so there's this hunt for this serial killer.
Yes.
And meanwhile, there's perpetrators all around Alma. And Alma is suffering as she's surviving abuse at home. She has bruises all over her, and her teacher sees it and then does nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's as simple as that, is like someone not reporting something that's suspicious. It's as simple as just dismissing it as horseplay, right? And I've been put in the position more than once where I've had to be like, please don't do that. That is not that. I don't even know why you say please. Stop, right?
But it's like so deeply entrenched,
yes.
the way that we've been socialized. And I think this is especially for feminine people, but I think for everyone in some ways we're socialized to be polite and not make waves. And I obviously have a pop culture brain, but what you're talking about is so interesting to think about in the context of what is happening with P. Diddy right now, what has happened with R. Kelly, what has happened with these predators who create systems that allow them to hurt people over and over and over again. And it's like there's a network around it. And I think that's such an important through line to understand, is that even though someone might be technically behaving in isolation, there's an entire system that is set up in place to allow it to happen. And it takes like intense bravery and discomfort and work to disrupt that system. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's, it does. I think that it takes is practice.
Yes.
So the bravery isn't natural for me.
Yeah.
It does take a lot of practice, especially, again, because of that expectation of being Asian, that you're going to be a nice woman.
Yeah.
Right? And it does take a lot of practice to, sit in the center of myself and have a particular gaze about me and to be like, actually, no, I don't want that. But it takes thousands of repetitions, but you have to practice. And some people will put in the work and some people don't want to.
Yeah.
So I guess that, the challenge is that, are we up for that? Are we up for that? And I'm hoping the people who read the book will practice.
Well, I think having it so obvious, like it's so much easier to make the connections between the ways that we are complicit in not protecting other people or not standing up for other people, to like the through line sometimes is easier to see in stories instead of in our own lives or in the news or in whatever.
Yes.
So hopefully it even just allows people to see where there is a role they can play.
Yes.
To like open the door to practice.
Yes, absolutely. And as an example, right? Like Alma as an example.
Yeah.
There's so many examples in the book in which you can see that someone could have spoken up.
Yes.
Someone could have said something.
And even Alma herself could have spoken up in different contexts. And to see the journey of her being able to was like, I felt like cheering when she finally gives Mateo the letter and is like firm with him.
Yes.
Like, yes, okay, you had to do this. Like, ma'am, you really need to do this. But also, we can do this. Like, we can do this.
Yes, especially when it comes to our like the youth in our lives.
Yeah.
Especially with our masculine youth.
100%.
I remember doing a reading of Scarborough once, and I don't even know why this question came up, but this man asked I'm just wondering if you have any tips for young women on how they can protect themselves.
Yuck, sir.
I don't even know why. It had nothing to do
Why?
with Scarborough. I had no idea, like with Scarborough the book. And I said, I'm not sure why you're asking that question. However, I think that I just want to challenge you to consider perhaps teaching young men not to rape people.
Which,
And he was like,
what did he,
oh, yeah, like, oh, no,
Like
I didn't think about not
hadn't
raping
occurred
people.
to you, eh?
Yeah. It was so funny. Like I was like, oh, interesting. But the truth is that it's not just men who think this. Like we've all been groomed to
We
believe
have all
this,
been
right?
groomed to think this. And I think this is also what, this is not obviously the same kind of abuse, but this also is what allows us maybe to not recognize abusive behavior in other genders.
This
When
is
we
so
decide that there's just one type of abuse or one way that abuse happens, like I think when we talk about Alma's mother, who is deeply abusive and not just physically abusive, but like emotionally scarring
Yes.
abusive, I think part of this conversation is around who is perceived as an abuser.
Exactly. And I think that that's important too. Like I want to say that there is one reading that I did of Behind You, where the host had really put the spotlight on the two people who were masculine in the room and saying, well, surely you haven't felt this before. And
Why do you think that?
I know. And I said, I just want to challenge you, actually. I love the show. Has anybody watched the show Baby Reindeer on Netflix? What I love so much about that is that you were seeing a man who is a survivor. And he's grappling with this idea of whether or not he deserved it,
Yes.
right? And what I loved about this is that you rarely see this side of sexual harm, and I thought it was important, so I brought it up. I said, actually, I would really encourage everyone to watch Baby Reindeer about what harm can look like, and also what it looks like when we don't respect each other's boundaries, right? That really gave everyone some pause, because I don't judge the person for saying that. What I'm saying is that it's interesting that that's the knee-jerk reaction. And so I try as much as possible to have a great amount of compassion when people, for example, when I'm being interviewed by the press.
Yeah.
And most of the time they want to mention this perpetrator. They're like, tell me about those days. And I said, okay, let's just pause for a second. Can I ask you, let's just ask ourselves why we want to go back to him.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on survivorship or victimhood, right? And how we can't have this happen again. Yeah. So that's been really great, like to really just challenge people, including the journalists who are interviewing me, because even though my publicist Cindy is still saying, like, we are not mentioning his name or whatever, you'll still have people in the press mentioning his name. And I don't want to glorify him. I don't want to put any more focus on him. I just want it to be about what it's like to be in your body and to be empowered to change other people's bodies and the way that we relate to one another.
Okay, I have a process question though about what it was like to go back to that time, because we were talking about this a little bit in the green room, where I was in elementary school when this was happening. And so I grew up in Oakville, so it wasn't necessarily the Scarborough part, but the later times. And as I was reading, I had this really interesting experience of familiarity. The way that Alma responds and the way that Alma moves through the world, this like weird combination of distance or like focus on the things that are happening in her own life and this culture of fear. And so I'm interested, because you also had personal experience of that time, what was it like to revisit it through the process of writing the book?
Well, to give you an idea, I was at, like, some of my final edits were done at the Vancouver Writers Festival in October. And I just had a full, like, guttural opening by the water, because it happens at what is that island there in Vancouver?
In Victoria?
No, in Vancouver. What is that island?
Vancouver Island.
Granville. Yes.
I was like,
So
Vancouver
by
Island?
so
Not
Granville
that.
Island. So as you know, that there's like this, there's docks and stuff like that, and I just walk the docks, just bawling my eyes out.
Yeah.
Bawling my eyes out because you sit there and the office feels so heavy. A lot of times I really commune with ancestors when I'm writing. I let them really guide me as to how I'm going to be writing this all. And my office felt so heavy with the people who have been lost and found.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I wanted to do right by them. And they were expecting a lot from me.
Yeah.
And I, as you're just like writing the final edits, it always feels like this bittersweet moment where you're going to miss them because you know that they're going to move on to another, the spirits are going to move on to another
Right.
writer. But I felt proud. I felt exhausted, and but also just so happy to give them a chance to shine.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that people, and also whoever they are, because we know that most likely there are countless victims
Who
that we don't know.
Yeah.
And also people who did survive that we don't know what their identities are, just because there are people who did not come forward, understandably
so.
Right? So I just hope that wherever they are in the world, that they know that I cared about them and I loved them enough to write this book.
I love that framing because the intention is so different from what we usually see in true crime,
Mm-hmm.
which is really glossing over who the people were unless they fit an archetype of a perfect victim.
Yes.
And instead focusing on the thrill of the hunt, of finding the bad guy,
Yes.
that kind of framing. But what's interesting to me is that the book is very readable and kind of very smartly subverts some of those approaches. It feels like a thriller, but it doesn't have the same intention behind it. What was did you purposely use any elements of true crime or thriller? How did you go about deciding what you wanted to subvert and what you wanted to throw out?
Well, the great thing is that I was writing the final draft of this book around the same time that I was writing the first draft of the screenplay.
Okay.
So, because the book, before it even hit the shelves, was already optioned by Conquering Lion Films that did Brother, Book of Negroes.
Yeah.
And so what was really great, speaking with Clement Virgo, who will be directing the film, we were talking about that. It's like, how do we do it so that it feels like it's a thriller, but you're subverting it so that, so there is the jump scare.
Yeah.
But then
it's not like the cheapness and tawdriness of a thriller.
Exactly. But it's playing with the cheapness and tawdriness of but by doing that, but then it's the horror is, what is it like to be a woman? You know what I mean? There's somebody trying to touch my boob.
Life.
Yeah, there's somebody policing me about my bra line. It's because that's what it's like, right? Being a woman is that I feel like just because of your body parts that someone's got to come get you.
Yeah.
And so so we were trying to think of that. So as I was writing, because I was writing it simultaneously with the first draft of the screenplay, it really helped me fuel that jump scare in the book.
That sounds like a lot of work, so I don't know that I want to say that's a smart way of doing it, but that being able to sort of cross-pollinate between genres is so smart.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense why it feels so readable and fast-paced and you're carried along with the story, but never in a way that feels gross and disrespectful.
Yes, absolutely. And because of the fact that film really forces you to go, what is this story about?
Yeah.
What is the story about?
Yes.
You have to do it in an hour and a half, 2 hours. What is it about?
So you really have to distill.
So then with the book, it meant that I didn't get to have, I didn't allow myself this this flowery language to get in the way of the
the
immediacy of it. Yeah.
Okay. There's a part in the book that when I first read it, I was quite unhappy with you.
Okay.
which is the part where Alma and Nira, her wife, they tell the story of their relationship.
Yes.
And the story of their relationship is that like Alma asked Nira out like 5 times, and then she gave her a chance. And it's such a love story, and I went along the whole book, reading the same book that we all read.
Yes.
And all of the things and knowing that I was interviewing Catherine, so I was making notes and everything. Whole time I'm like, so romantic. And then there's one point where they're having a conversation, and Nira points out that that wasn't really respectful. From a consent perspective,
Yes.
that wasn't respecting it. And I read that and was like, Catherine.
Yes.
I was so annoyed.
Yeah.
But it was such a good moment because it really reframed all of those things. Like, it really was effective.
Oh, good. I'm
Like,
glad.
very effective. So I want to ask why it was, I kind of know, but I want you to tell us, like,
Yes.
why was it important to include that moment so that Alma was not just a victim of or someone who experienced abuse, but also complicit in breaking consent as well?
Yes. Oh, because well, exactly that. It's that we need to understand that Alma has played a part, you know, and rape culture hurts us all, and we also hurt each other.
Yeah.
All of us hurt each other through rape culture.
Right.
That's the thing, is that it's almost like as if all of us are involved in this really weird trance and dance, you know.
Very much so.
And not until somebody turns off the music do we go, oh, what the heck was that, right?
Yeah.
And so in this moment of awakening for Alma, she's like, wait a minute. This entire time I've created this narrative that I was hurt, that no one's believed me. I think, meanwhile, look at what I've just done.
That I have hurt people.
Yeah, especially when it comes, and I really wanted to challenge too about romance.
Yeah.
I've been the person who thought, you fight for someone.
Of course, you fight for your love.
You know, totally. Well, it's just like I'm of the generation of say anything. I know, you stand outside someone's window with a stereo.
Box.
Yeah, with a boom box. And
very loudly
while
proclaiming
they're
your love.
sleeping.
Yes.
Can you imagine? I really hope that we can redo that scene with someone saying,
replace it with something else.
it's like, please stop. Go away. I said no.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care about how nice this song is. It doesn't matter. That is very strange to stand outside of someone's window.
It's very strange. I had this moment, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago. I was listening to 90s music, obviously. And Mariah Carey's Always Be My Baby came on, and I listened to the lyrics and was like,
oh, that's every song. That is almost every song. And my friend and I talk about that, like how toxic all the song lyrics are. It's so horrible.
like, is Mariah a stalker?
Or don't stand, no, what is the other one? Every Breath You Take.
That's atrocious.
That is a horrible song.
Like, you need pop-up video for that. I don't know if everyone remembers pop-up video, but you need pop-up video to be like, this is rape culture. This part of the song, also rape culture. This part over here, still rape culture. Like, it's so bad.
It's so bad. And then, or Don't You Want Me, Baby.
Yeah.
That song from the 80s. So almost every song is like that. And my friend and I were laughing about that we have a lot of compassion too for songwriters, just because songs that are sort of anti-rape culture, I can imagine that would sound very boring.
Like, the problem is that the emotion is less.
Yeah, the intensity is less.
The intensity is dialed way down.
It's dialed way down.
Like, hey, I really like you, but it's okay if you don't like me too. I can just go my own way. Like, that's not. The storytelling is a little harder, I understand.
I know, it's just so funny. But yeah, we're trying to think about, like, what is that going to sound like? What would that song sound like? Probably not a top 10 song. But
significantly more chill, though.
Yeah.
A little bit less indoctrination. That's
I know.
I meant to ask this. I'm asking all my questions out of order because of how the conversation's going. But I wanted to ask you about the 2 timelines, because I feel like that going between Alma's childhood and going between her adulthood allowed you to see so clearly the connections between what shapes her and what she has to overcome. But I'm just curious about how. Like, what did you do? Did you plot it out the way that it would happen in the book? Did you plot out each timeline? Like, how did you decide when to switch back and forth and what to show from each timeline?
Oh, I didn't map it out. I just wrote it exactly how it's, like, in the same order.
That's very impressive.
But no, but the thing is that what I think of as, so when you're going through life, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're driving your car or whatever. I always think that, like, the past is always, like, flashing
Right.
through your mind. And then there's, like, you're wondering, like, what is the pendulum that'll bring you back to that moment?
That's fascinating.
So then I thought, every time I was like, okay, I know that the pendulum is coming here, and then I'd go back to the past
Okay. Are you in general a map it out kind of writer, or are you writing like on vibes?
I'm writing out on just exactly what my ancestors are telling me to write. Like it's like now it's coming, and I can feel it in my body that I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to go here, and because I feel that they're guiding me at all times.
Yeah.
And then, but when it comes to for film and television, I do have to do some mapping out just so that I can understand the balance of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, there's really no mapping.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I also teach journalism, and so I'm constantly telling my students, like, create your outline. It will help you with your flow. Like, it's such it's so helpful when you're learning to write, but I can't quite imagine what it would be like to map out a book like this. And so it's so funny when you're like, I just did not.
Yeah. However, okay, I got to say that, okay, so when you're letting the ancestors guide you, you do have to go back, and then I had to sort of map out years.
Okay.
So how old is she? How old is she at this time?
You had to do the fine-tuning a little bit after.
Yes. Yeah. And so, like, for example, Scarborough, because it's like dealing with many different characters, I'm trying to like make the balance, is that it is a color-coded chart. It's like,
that makes me very happy. I love a color-coded chart.
Right? I love spreadsheets.
I love a
spreadsheet. But yeah, but with this one, it's more just time. Like, I just need to know, okay, exactly if she's going through puberty at this time, what exactly is happening.
Right.
And then
right.
Then we're expecting that there's going to be some kind of dance happening in high school, like so stuff
when
like
with
that.
Those kind
just
of
making
waypoints.
Sure. Yeah, and just like imagining what her body's like at that time, and describing what her body is like, and how she's moving through the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you? This question just popped into my head, so I don't have it like perfectly phrased. But did you feel like there were any parts of yourself in any particular characters? Like, not necessarily that they were autobiographical, but I feel like they feel so real. It feels like they were infused with real people. So actually, not just yourself, but are there other people who show up in your books, and in this book specifically?
For respect, I try to make sure that everything is just, if you can't go through the world without the residue of people on you, right?
Yeah.
Like, in order to draw a banana, you need to know what a banana looks like, right?
Fair.
So there's that. However, out of respect, I try to keep it as fictional as possible. Yeah.
Because I was thinking of, I can't remember her last name, but Marta, the teacher, who plays this like fun date. Because the other thing that's so interesting is, even though there are so many examples of people who are complicit in abuse or perpetuating abuse, you've also written some really beautiful relationships. So the relationship between Marta and her partner and their daughter, and also Marta and Alma, like and Nira and Alma, like there are really lovely relationships in there.
Yes. That
really, I think, remind you that it is not, yes, everybody is complicit, but not everybody or not everything is like doomed.
Yes. Yeah, because there has to be examples of what success looks like.
Yeah.
Right? And I think all of us can piece success together. It doesn't have to be like fully from one. Like, for example, like in my life, like I collect like, oh, I really love the way that this couple like does this. I really love the way that this person does this in their life. And I can piece together like the ideals of what I want to live in my life, right? Mm-hmm. So then for Alma, she's been able to piece together like, what does a functioning family look like, right? Especially when she survived abuse, is that she's able to have an example. And it also allows her to see her faults and be willing to change.
And like have compassion for herself. Because the other thing that is hard, I think, for Alma, and I think probably for a lot of people, is that when you feel that you have, there's a part where she says she's always the problem. Like it's always her fault, even when she doesn't know what the thing is. If you have been trained and socialized to think that way, then it's hard to have compassion for yourself.
Yes.
And then without compassion for yourself, you can't really like do better the next time.
Exactly. And I think that there is definitely a lot of compassion that I have for Alma as she figures it all out. I really wanted to show how clumsy it is because I want everyone to know that they're experiencing clumsiness,
Yes.
learning how to battle rape culture, learning the language, learning possibilities, reading books, like, getting into the resources, putting it into action. All of that's clumsy. Like for myself right now, I'm doing a lot of learning around sex work, for example.
Right.
And also, even though I do have disabilities, is that I have a lot of internalized ableism, right?
Yeah.
I'm having to learn a lot. It's so humbling. It's kind of painful and really awkward. But I just have to say to myself, like, it's worth it. It's worth it, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think we use the platitude of like, you should be a lifelong learner. And we use that idea, but we don't always accept that we can and should be changing our minds and like learning more and incorporating new information, and that's okay to.
Yes.
And I feel like sometimes the flip side of that is a fear of failure. Like it actually is okay to try a new thing.
Yes.
Even if you are thinking you're a whole adult, like it's actually okay to continue doing that, and that feels like part of it too.
Yes. I mean, we do. We have to trust that we can make decisions.
Yeah.
We can make decisions, and we can see what works for us.
Which goes back to that idea of autonomy. Like we have bodily autonomy, but we can trust ourselves, and we can stand firm in our decisions, and we actually are empowered to make decisions about ourselves.
Absolutely.
And about how we move through the world. Like it feels very related.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
We're vibing right now. Okay, I think we are very close to the end. So, but I wanted to ask you if there's anything I didn't ask you about, or that hasn't come up as you've been answering questions about this book. Like, is there anything you want to talk about?
Well, I want to say that what I find really interesting, I think that some people, and I would understand it too, if I saw this book on the shelf and I was a little bit nervous around it.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, oh, is this going to be like, is it just about rape?
This is a real downer of a read.
Yeah, right. Is that I want people to understand that it actually is. I'm not saying that it is a light read. What I'm saying is that it's a very empowering read.
Yeah.
And also I'm hoping that the people see that I've been very responsible with regards to how I talk about harm in a way that it is not harming the people who are reading it. So, from what I've looked at on Goodreads is that people were like, I'm so happy that she was able to do it in a way that was really respectful.
Yeah.
Because I find, as a survivor, sometimes I find the superfluous use of details really offensive. Because then we're harming the character. I understand that they don't exist in reality, but the thing is, we're harming the people reading it by
like
giving those
harm.
Salacious details. And you'll see like how when harm is done, you'll see it in a way that it is more poetic than it is violent.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
I feel like is a nice model too, because just to be able to see you do that, because it doesn't lessen the impact.
Yeah.
It's not you don't understand that what is happening is really terrible, but you don't necessarily have to engage with each detail of what happened.
Yes.
So that makes a lot of sense.
So that's just because I know that I imagine that some people would be bracing themselves while reading this book. I think it's more like I want people to understand that it really is a celebration of the people who have survived and not survived. Yeah,
and it like really honors them.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This was such a good conversation.